I'd started my project 2 weeks before uni like started back up and going into classes. And so we're going into classes, and everyone's, oh, what would you guys like to do? And everyone's pitching all these rough ideas. Like, I want to make a children's book. I want to make a brand about this or that. And I was coming in here and I had this big, massive book, and I was like, yep, here's what I've started. I'm going for this. I've done my research. I'm creating this adaptation of Jonathan Livingstone with a more New Zealand twist.
I just realized that I didn't like the hat too much because it was just way bulky. I have so many hats. I collect hats, right? So I at least probably have about over 50 of them. And I get given gifts as hats. I wear hats. And I'm always picking one up once every 2 weeks. So that's 52 hats just a year. Okay. It gets crazy with just being a collector and being into things what I do. Right? So let's go. Let's talk about the Great North. Your book, we all find our way, volume 1. How many volumes are you going to look at doing of this?
So this was True North started as a university project. It was in my final year of uni. In our last semester, so the second half of the final year, we have a capstone project, which is essentially, it's an open brief. We get to do whatever we wanted.
Right.
And with that freedom, comes a lot of questions of like, shit, like we've literally had no direction. What do we want to do with all the skills we've learned? And so for a lot of people, that's where they come in with their passion projects, with the things that they like, their early business launches that they want to do in the future, and they start setting it up now. And so for me, I thought long and hard, and I was like, well, what's something that I really want to do? What's something that drives me forward? Something that I can work on and that'll bring a smile to my face. Something that I can enjoy, like purely enjoy, not for the sake of doing it to get a result, but doing it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
And as I briefly touched on earlier, I loved comics. I've been surrounded by them for years, and it came to me. I was like, wow. I always pitched myself as an illustrator. I took art subjects in high school and throughout uni. They're all trying to make us into designers. They're going to work in a studio and make all these graphic things. And I was like, man, I want to draw. I have these things in my head that I want to put them on paper. I want to see what I can create with my hands. And so that's where it led me to. I was like, I'm going to make my own comic. I want to fully write my own comic, my own story, and just start that. Even if it doesn't go anywhere, that was my first thing. And so, of course, you're going through drafting stages and trying to pick a story. And of course, because it was only a semester, we only had essentially like 3-4 months to do it. I was like, you can't be too over ambitious because you still have to submit something at the end. And that's where I was like, well, started looking for inspiration in different areas. And I love drawing, but I didn't want to make a comic about people per se. I didn't want to draw people for the sake of, I don't like drawing faces, but proportions are annoying.
Which is kind of like, I didn't expect that, right? So I didn't expect, birds and nature and stuff like that, which is what kind of caught me off guard, because I was like, because when we met each other for the first time, even though we'd been emailing each other because of you being at Plunge, I come with Stuart and meeting you, and I'm like, I just see a white book and I go, and you're like, oh, you can have it. I'm like, no, I don't do that. I'm going to pay for it. And, otherwise, I'm not going to, I didn't even get a chance to look inside it. That was a weird thing because I was just, and
yeah, well, you're so busy with Plunge going on. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, even when I sat down, I was talking to Stuart about things. I didn't even get a chance to talk to you about it. And I was like, well, I need to know more about what, and I'm all about local community artists and what's going on, and like really figuring out if somebody's doing something that's got to do with the comic books. I want to know, and because I want to know how I can push them out more, right? Get more what is that called? Support base or whatever. Just more attraction to. That's it. Expose them to a bigger audience, because I think having more local work out there is a good thing, because you get to hear a lot of different voices, you get to see a lot of different art, and what I love about this book is it's totally different than what I would ever think about picking up to read. Yet I enjoyed it, right?
Oh,
I would, it's like, I mean, there's, because our writers, like our artwork, like the artists that work with us work from like horror to PJ and Shibi, a parody type humor thing about bears, right? They're anamorphic bears. And so now having something like this come out about birds. Now, what are the characters? Like, tell us about the characters in the True North.
So I'll touch a little bit on my inspiration. So when I was looking at starting this project up, I was looking for different things. I didn't want to draw people, and I wanted to do like animalistic creatures. I wanted to do like landscapes and animals. That was my thing. I was like, how do I tie this in? And then my dad brought up, he was like, hey, like, I started thinking, he's like, yeah, I've seen some of your drawings of birds, and I know you like birds. And he goes, there's this movie. Well, first there's this book, but he goes, there's this movie you might want to watch first and then read the book. And it was called Jonathan Livingstone, The Seagull,
right,
which is a book that was released in 1970 and then adapted into a movie in 1973 about a seagull. So the whole perspective is from a seagull who's essentially trying to separate himself from the flock, or differentiate himself from other people or other entities that are essentially copy paste the same thing. They're all just, there's hundreds of seagulls in a flock, but he's trying to find his individuality. And it's a story about like spiritualism and individuality versus collectivism, and there's all these underlying themes. But when I remember watching it, and something just clicked. I was like, wow, I'm really liking this. Like, it really spoke to me. And I was like, I'd love to do an adaptation of this. Taking similar themes, taking even a similar storyline, and kind of making it my own. And then this is where I was like, well, and I started to tie in some of my personal things or feelings that I've gone through or that I want to go through. And that's where I essentially went down the path, and I ended up going on making a comic book about a migratory bird, the mutton bird, which is the Maori name of the mutton bird is Tītī, which is why it's the main character's name. Right.
So the weird thing is, like, whenever you have a like, for me, right, whenever I have a different if I use reference language for other cultures, I always put an asterisk, and underneath in the box I do the English translation of it, so you can follow through it. I was looking for that. I was like, what does the Tītī mean? And there wasn't one, sadly. And so having that explained, now I get it. So mutton bird, carry on.
Yeah, it was like super vaguely written at the beginning, but it was kind of something that I wanted to kind of keep, to make the sort of reader kind of do a bit more research, because of course it's volume 1, not everything is covered, and it being a university project, I had to cut some corners and for the sake of producing something. But yeah, I ended up going for this story, this migratory bird. It's they live and breed in New Zealand, and their cycle is essentially this big circle up to the northern hemisphere, the Bering Sea, and then back through Hawaii, and they're making essentially a loop around the Pacific.
It's crazy.
And that spoke with me of, you know, being born and raised in the Pacific and around Pacifica cultures. And that was also like another playing point. Was like, damn, I can make a comic book that's like founded in New Zealand, that'll give it a bit more gravity, a bit more connection for especially people here in New Zealand. They'll be like, oh, this is awesome. This is about a local bird, or it's about a local story in a way. And yeah, so I did my research on all that, and I'd started my project 2 weeks before uni like started back up and going into classes. And so we're going into classes, and everyone's, oh, what would you guys like to do? And everyone's pitching all these rough ideas. I want to make a children's book. I want to make a brand about this or that. And I was coming in here and I had this big, massive book, and I was like, yep, here's what I've started. I'm going for this. I've done my research. I'm creating this adaptation of Jonathan Livingstone with a more New Zealand twist, a more, I guess, a different side of the story with different themes, but still keeping the same sort of feeling of it.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Like, so this, I didn't ask before, but like the university course, what was it for?
So I was studying communication design. So it's essentially, it got renamed a couple of years ago. The course was just called graphic design.
Right.
And so they taught us things from the Adobe Suite, Illustrator, InDesign, Photoshop, Acrobat, all that stuff, even a little bit of video. This course was essentially building us to be graphic designers for brands. But, you know, of course, me wanting to be an illustrator was always kind of, you know, do I really fit in this course? How can I turn my skills into an actual trade? And I'd kind of, you know, I'd found some workarounds in earlier projects, incorporating illustrations where I could, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And yeah, in the capstone project, that's where I was like, I'm going to go a completely different route. I'm making a comic book, and yeah, here's where I went and what I did. And I think there was like two of us in the class that did that.
All right. So there was another person who did a comic book as well, apart from you.
Yeah.
So what direction did they go to? Because you went the nature direction with like with birds and stuff, and they went, which direction did they go?
So my friend that also did a graphic novel comic book, she went in the like mystical fairy fantasy. She was essentially it was a story about, because her thing was that she loved insects and fantasy. So she was incorporating, and she was a really incredibly talented artist who could draw people and expression. And her art style was quite unique in the way that everything, despite that she was combining so many different things, it just worked. So yeah, and I think her one was an original story planned from the beginning. And same, she only did chapter 1 because of the limitations, where we essentially both set out our books of here is the beginning of what we would like to do in the future, and whether we go back to that or not is, you know, that's something we'll see in the future. But yeah.
How long did it take to there's about 28 to 32 pages in this, isn't there? Like I was trying to count it, but I've forgotten what the count.
Yeah,
I counted.
there's around 30 pages, I think. 28, I think.
Right, 28 of art, and then the rest would cover and so on and extras.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to actually, because it's all hand, right? It's all hand drawn. It's not like digital.
No,
you know.
Yeah, didn't use any tablets, no line corrections. This is something I love showing. This was my essentially my working book.
Yeah.
This was all the work that went into it, all hand drawn, all been scanned. I mean, it was like edited digitally, of course, and compiled that way. But in terms of the time it took to create all my illustrations, probably, because I went through so many steps of first draft, second draft, the beta, the formative, the alpha, and all that stuff. Maybe a month and a half, probably.
That's pretty quick for freehand. Like, I mean, this is your, like, a whole month that you took away from school, right? To go, this is what I'm going to do each day, and you're just playing away with it. Probably about 7 days a week, if I know an artist, right? There's no sort of time off, because inspiration comes at any time to do it, and so you just like, get me my notebook or my workbook and get my, So this is hand painted, right? Or is it colored, like pencil colors? I'm trying to figure that out.
It was hand illustrated and in black pens, and then originally because a lot of my inspiration came from manga. I wanted to do a black and white piece. I wanted to challenge myself using only two tones, white and black, and maybe some grays. What emotions could I bring through? What visuals could I portray? Like giving myself this extra challenge. But it was a pretty big challenge just because the time frame was also a massive challenge. But because of circumstances with COVID, this was around the time where that 100-day lockdown started in Auckland, when we had 3 months of
so this actually came about during the 2020.
No, this was 2021.
Oh, wow.
This was last year. So this was I think that lockdown started in like August. It was like, it was a Tuesday. I was coming home from classes, and then on the bus, get the alert where it's like, hey, we're going into level 4 lockdown tomorrow. And it's like, oh, wow, okay. So that changed a lot of things, because it took away the physical aspect of it, which was something I'd planned and in my timekeeping, that I needed to finish my comic before then so that I could print it and go through all those tests. But because COVID, everything became digital. So I essentially ended up with a lot of free time, because I was at home all the time, and because I couldn't even go outside. It's not even like I didn't want to, so I couldn't really. I had this time where I managed to produce a lot more, and after I think my beta, so like my second to last copy that I was submitting at these checkpoints that we had, my lecturer, who was also my mentor, was like, hey, I really like this. You should really add color. And I was like, arguing my point of why I didn't want to do it. And he's like, no, because you don't need to print it. Just make it, all you need to send us is a PDF. So keep working on it all the way until 1 week before it's due, and then just spend that last week essentially making the ready file. And so that's where it led on to me creating, choosing watercolors to color and paint my book. And that was another challenge in of itself, because I'm not great with watercolors, or I didn't think I was. I didn't have much experience with them, but one of my very influential artists, his work is in watercolors, and I was like, man, if I can recreate that sort of style, that sort of feeling, I wonder what it would look like. And so I just dove straight into it. I was like, all right, let's get into it, and did all these watercolors and that's where we got to where we are today with the original work. And so yeah, there was a lot of experimentation in this project.
Yeah.
But that's got to there.
You've scanned, like you handed it in, you scanned it all up, and then turned into PDF. And then what was the next stage? Because we have a book now, but what was the next stage between the PDF to get into the book, and why was putting the book out part of the course, or was it just handing the PDF and that's that?
So before COVID happened, it was depending on what you chose to do for your project, there was a physicality to it. There needed to be, so if someone was making a brand, they needed to make boxes, or they needed to make the actual item or something like that. And if you were making a book, one of the requirements was, well, you need to supply us the full final product. When COVID came around, they have to scrap that because they can't take it. So that's when they were like, oh yeah, just make it into a PDF. And of course, you know, did that for uni. It was cool. Submitted it. It's the end of uni. Cool. You finish. And after that, I went through probably a period of like 2 months where I was a bit sick of it, because I'd worked so hard on it for so long. I'd really poured my heart into it, and I hadn't even received the grades for it yet. So there was a lot of like tension where I just didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to do anything related to it. It was like I'd finished it and I'd put it aside. And then, you know, we get our grades. I'm pretty happy with what I got. And we start doing, me and my dad just did a couple of test prints, just ones at home on our printer. And I was like, hey, you know, it's kind of cool being able to actually flip the pages. And because the thing on PDF is that, you know, you're seeing the spread or you're seeing the individual
boring.
Page. It's boring.
You see it over and over. It's like, there's no life to it. Like I'm lettering a comic book, a 24 page comic right now. It's like, it's just, it's all in front of me digitally. It's all there, which is hand drawn by the artist over in Estonia. And until it's like this, and I can say, this is it here, it's still nothing on the computer. It's like, for me, because for him, he's there physically, right? Like you have your physical book there, so you can go here, look, it's here. But until it's like this, where you can show to people, it doesn't feel real.
Yeah, and that's definitely a thing that is that for me, for a while, it was definitely, just a project, just the uni project that I did. And, you know, I got the grades for it, didn't really matter. And that's just because of circumstances, how it happened, until with a bit of pressure and we start making some drafts. And at one point, after seeing a fully compiled draft, of course, not bound perfectly, not printed professionally, but I was like, this really has a significant impact on it. And that's why I was like, shit, like I'm serious. I want to get serious. I want to get serious back into this. I want to see what I can do with it. And I was looking for jobs around that time, having been qualified now and finished uni. And I was very lucky of finding a job at a printing lab, which was like my ideal thing. I didn't want to go into a studio. I didn't want to be the sort of snobby graphic designers that they kind of modeled us to, the ones that work 24/7, that always have to read their emails. I was like, no, I want to go somewhere 9 to 5, see the physicality of what I'm producing and have that sort of work life. And then so I managed to get a job there, and I'm talking with my friend, with my colleagues, and you know, it gets brought up. Even in my interview, I brought my draft copy. I was like, here, this is an example of my work. And from there, it developed into like, hey, this is actually the perfect place and opportunity to create my book, to actually do that final step, since I'm actually in the environment perfect for it, rather than essentially commissioning someone or paying someone to do it and then getting the product. I got to witness every single step. and work on it and make the adjustments when needed, and talking with the printers downstairs and the finishers. And so I placed in my order, got my books printed, all professionally bound, and I was like, you know, fuck it, it's my first one. I'm gonna splurge out a little bit, get it all nicely done on good paper, and yeah, it's a totally different feeling.
That is what I love about this book, because you know, this is something you can put on the library shelf, right? Yeah. And that's a great thing about it, is that you can actually have, and this is where I'm all about, is for our books, is I want it in the libraries. I want it to be accessible, because that's where I got to access books like Tintin, right? And Asterix. I mean, of course, my friend Regan across the road was getting me 2000 AD comics, but all the other stuff I was getting from the library at school. And so my thing is, I want to see our books in the libraries as well, and the young adults and the children's and the adults and so on, in all those sections, because I want to write in all those sections, and I am. And so I want, you know, it'll be cool to see this in the libraries, in the schools, because why not? It's so well done. It's so well packaged. It's, you know, it's able to stand on its own on the shelf, you know, and I think one thing I find really kind of on the down key about artists who do stuff, they don't think really about the final package, you know. And I think where do you want to see the end of this? Is it going to be in a comic shop? Is it going to be on the bookshelf? Where is it going to be? And if you start thinking of it on the library, that'll get your brain saying, I have to get the quality. I have to get sure the paper's right. I have to make sure that those that actually, you know, who I should talk to at the library to make sure there's books at the library, the schools, my connections, you know. And it's, I think the more, and this is why I'm so supportive of local creativity when it comes to art and like comics and manga. It's like, why don't we have our, you know, support our local creatives to actually be able to get them onto libraries around the world, not just here, around the world, because that means there's a support system for them to actually make income off their work, right? And the whole thing is that we need to bring that support in. And so how does that work? Well, then you got to have that sustainability aspect to it. And I like the idea, the fact that you went to uni, you're from Whangarei, went to uni, came back to Whangarei, are working in Whangarei, have created artwork in Whangarei, and you're actually part of the community now, right? Because the art community is such, but not in the sense of like what you're saying, the toffee nose. We're not about that. And this is the thing I love about Whangarei and the community that we have. We are very low-key, grounded community when it comes to creativeness. We're not the snobby kind. We just are here doing our thing. And the great thing is that
we just want to produce and show what we have, and you know, if it takes off, awesome. If it doesn't, in a way, we still got what we wanted, which is producing it, which is sharing it. And even even if it's not again #1 top selling, I don't care about that stuff. My main thing for when I was printing them, and the reason why I went with a small run, was because I wanted all the people that helped and supported me along the way to have a copy, a signed copy with a little note. I wanted my lecturers to have one. I wanted my grandparents. And at first it's just, you know, your close circles. And then slowly over time, you start getting people reaching out, contacting, like, oh, hey, you know, I've seen this book. Could I get one? Or, oh, hey, I saw this. I want to put it in our school library. Or, hey, all these things. And it's, the ripple effect of what
there was a couple things before you go to the next. How many did you print? Before I move on to the next question, how many did you print?
So I printed 100 copies of my colored version, the one you have.
Right.
And I printed 25 copies of my beta version, which was the black and white one, which was slightly different in the inside pages, just because essentially it didn't, like, it still had shadows and depth and that sort of sense. yeah, just no shading essentially. And so I just printed
Awesome.
25 of those just because I know they'll be a little bit less popular. And I just have a couple select friends that were like, oh yeah, essentially the people that are more into like manga and that sort of style, it's more drawing to them. But
Right.
I guess to the general public, it's the colored version, the full encompass project, which is why I went for 125 copies in total.